Hi, everybody, and welcome to our latest episode of ClevrChat. I'm going to be here today with Chris Bayliss from Zoom, who is one of their public sector specialists. Chris, do you want to do a bit of an intro?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Pleasure being here with Cloud Clever today. I lead our housing association sector at Zoom, part of the public sector team, and we've taken an approach to have a kind of dedicated approach to verticals because we recognise there are common themes and challenges across sectors like housing, and that's what we're here to talk about today. So yeah, thanks, Dave.
Perfect. Lovely to have you here. Straight into it, Chris. When you work with the housing sector, what do you see as the biggest pressures that are facing that sector right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's well publicised. There are a lot of pressures in the sector. But just to pick out like four, I think probably the most timely one right now is the compliance pressures. Mm-hmm. So increased regulation around damp and mould through our Awab's law, where housing associations are having to respond within 24 hours to damp and mould inquiries. It's putting a lot of pressure on staff and on contact centres. And then there's like tenant satisfaction measures, social housing regulations. So there's a lot of compliance related pressures on organisations. The really obvious one is financial strain. Everyone's feeling the heat of increased inflation. There are rent caps that are limiting housing associations how much they can increase their revenue, and increase maintenance costs as well. And of course, you've got rising tenant expectations for digital first and real-time communication. And that's exacerbated by many housing associations having like legacy systems, like creating silos and inefficiencies.
That makes sense. What does good look like in terms of tenant expectations around their communications piece?
Yeah, this is a great question. And of course, like in our sector, in our technology sector, there's always been a big push towards like omni-channel, digital first, which is really important. But I think in this sector where housing associations are dealing with some of the most vulnerable people in society, that kind of accessibility and empathy for all tenants, especially the vulnerable, is really, really important. Being able to speak to those people, sometimes that, the housing association might be the only organisation those people speak to in a week. So dealing with empathy and making those services accessible is really key. But of course, different demographics, different tenants have different expectations. So choice and consistency is also important. So phone is important for the most vulnerable, but offering chat, self-service video is important to people as well. And of course, having joined up communication, not repeating issues across departments, is really, really, really key as well. So it's very much like an outcome focused service. So like, how do we get that repair done first time? Is that, using video technology to coach that tenant through that issue? Or is it around, sending out the right person with the right tools, getting stuff done right first time in effect?
Yeah, we're looking at first contact resolution, aren't we? And trying to streamline the process for citizens contacting the housing associations and getting it right first time. Personally, I've had a number of conversations recently with housing associations, and one of the biggest challenges they face is actually working out how best to deal with their citizens. You've spoken about omni-channel, being able to have multiple channels. I think for me, automating some of those processes and making an agent's life easy means that when they're having to deal with the most vulnerable, it's having people available to deal with their citizens face to face or over, simple telephone calls. What experience do you have within Zoom with helping the housing associations to understand how best to modernise those channels whilst, understanding that they absolutely do need to deal with the most challenged in a face to face way?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and we're working with a housing association right now where there's a high percentage, they've got a higher percentage than the UK national average of adults that can't read or write. So of course, pushing everyone to digital is not appropriate. So what we very much talk about is encouraging housing associations to understand those customer journeys, kind of almost understand the personas that are within their tenant base as well. So there'll be making digital work for the people that want to use it is really important. So making sure that you've not kind of bombarded your tenants with different channels. Be really focused and focus on delivering service to those ones that are of highest value. So, for example, if you can deflect calls using virtual agents, when's my repair appointment? What's my rent balance? That kind of deflection and freeing up those workflows then makes your contact center agents more available to speak to the most vulnerable in society. So it's really getting those digital channels to make sure, those high kind of volume, kind of lower value transactional kind of based inquiries are dealt with more efficiently to free up those contact center agents. Because look, there's big talk and massive buzz around AI throughout the technology in industry. There's always that fear of jobs and what that means. But actually what I'm seeing out there is that you don't, housing associations as a sector, you don't have enough agents for the demand that you're getting. We talk about Awaab's law and we talk about regulation. That's putting a huge amount of strain on a small number of people. So if we can use AI to help lessen that burden, it frees you up to make sure you're delivering those great experiences to the most vulnerable.
That makes sense. So it's often said, isn't it, that housing associations, they're data rich, but sometimes information poor. And where you're talking about having to spot trends, looking at housing stock, where you'll see the same story consistently around damp and mold or boiler repairs or having to modernise kitchens or whatever it is. Can you talk about how Zoom can intelligently manage some of that information and help to spot trends within the sector?
Definitely, Dave. And one of the things that we talked about early on was those kind of silos and disconnected systems. So absolutely key to everything that we do in Zoom. We work within what I'd call a broader ecosystem. So you'll all have systems like SharePoint, Office 365 applications, Teams, but you'll also have a housing management system, which contains like a lot of the information around your tenants, around your housing stock. We can integrate into all of that with the help of obviously Clever and your professional service capability. So we collect a lot of data, so we can transcribe every conversation that you have with your tenants. So whether that's over the digital channels that you mentioned, Dave, so video, WhatsApp, SMS, social channels, but also voice as well. And consistency is key. So we can use our AI tools to then basically summarize that information and make sure you're consistently pushing the right information, whether that's summarization of contact center notes back into your housing management system, so that you've got consistent analytics that you can then draw upon. And again, because we have a single platform for not only contact center but back office telephony, so your kind of workforce, we can then report and provide analytics across all of your interactions across all of the organization. So we can surface like trends like repair types, repeat contacts, service gaps. We can provide customer service surveys to help with your tenant satisfaction measurements. We can show you real-time dashboards where the sentiment might be bad in the call and you want a supervisor to jump in. We can help with all of that, but make sure that the key thing here is to make sure all of that data and that information is joined up across your kind of ecosystem.
That makes sense. It keeps it consistent across the organisation, doesn't it? And you've got your younger people hitting the housing market that are much more comfortable logging tickets via WhatsApp or jumping on web chat and talking to AI. So we've got all of those good benefits, but we've got good old fashioned voice calls or face to face for certainly for the elderly or those in digital poverty. And I think for me and the experience that I've seen within certainly Cloud Clever, it's important to simplify that citizen experience. So if we can limit points of contact, so there's not multiple different telephone numbers for different organisations that are being treated in different ways within an organisation, where a certain department might be 9 to 5, Monday to Wednesday, where if we can bring all of this into a contact centre, we can ensure that the citizen experience is consistent across the board. And that makes an absolute difference. Good leading question for you. Talk to me about Zoom's relevance. What makes Zoom particularly well suited to housing associations?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's kind of, without being too cliche, Dave, it's a bit of a match made in heaven, to be honest, between Zoom and housing associations. I think the key thing is where Zoom, if you think about going back into the history of Zoom, why we were adopted so much during the pandemic and became a verb, it was because Zoom is very much an easy to use platform. So, that's really key. We're really good at rapid technology adoption. And from my experience of working with housing associations in the telephony and contact center space, that's really set us apart. So got organizations that are going through all of the challenges that we discussed at the top of the discussion around regulation, and they need to transform quick. There's a lot of complexity there, but I think our ability to make the complex straightforward and drive that user adoption, not only from staff, so that just know how to use Zoom because it's Zoom, but also in the contact center, we've got a lot of complexity, but we make it simple for the agents to deliver great tenant experiences. But on the flip side of those tenants coming into the contact center, whether it's via the phone, via video, via WhatsApp, we're making it really straightforward and simple for them to contact you and get what they need out. I think that's one key area. I think the other thing is, if you look at the housing sector and, you've got, and the personas that are involved. So you'll have your contact center agents, you'll have like kind of your office-based corporate workers. But you've also got quite a big field force of repair engineers, people that are going out and delivering services on the field. So kind of our position has been able to kind of provide a single platform across those business services, so contact center, and then going back into like workforce scheduling, going back into video, into unified communications, telephony. We could kind of meet all of the requirements across the organization in a single platform. So I think that's really important. I mean, we've got a Scottish housing association, for example, that are using Zoom for their damp and mold task force. So if their damp and mold inquiry comes through the contact center, that with context can then be passed through the Zoom platform to that damp and mold task force that are working in the field to resolve those important issues. So it's just one example of how it's a great fit.
That makes sense. Certainly on our side, in terms of migrating customers into Zoom, it's very different to where we used to be with legacy communications systems, where they were managed by an IT team. You needed to have a degree in telephony to make simple things like an IVR, your interactive voice response systems, set up to be dialed through by the tenants. They were very, very complicated, and we use Zoom internally at Clever, and a couple of things that have really stood out. One is the fact that it's a single client for the phone back office users and for contact center users. It looks the same, it feels the same, and you can tab through into where you're set up. So I think that's really important. Something we've seen over the last year or two with Zoom deployments is how much more can be managed internally by customer experience teams, by customer services teams, where they can manage their own environment themselves, and you don't have that same delay where you're having to raise tickets with IT to get technological changes made. It can be done within the teams, which massively helps, and it means then that there's not that kind of cost of training and onboarding super technical people to be dealing with these things. So it's a dead simple environment for the agents, for the back office staff, and they don't need to be calling IT to get these things changed. And I think for me, where there are tighter budgets, we talk about doing more with less. I think those are some of the things that would help our customers stretch their organizations more because they can be faster to change. Do you think there's any other bits that can make these communication tools help with that doing more with less and make that more achievable?
Absolutely, Dave. So, I think one of the key parts of that from a Zoom platform perspective as well is it is all our technology. So you'll speak to, it's a minefield, right, for customers looking at, we need to go and look at a new contact center telephony platform. There's a load of buzz around AI in the industry. Where do we go now? At Zoom, we've taken the approach of we have developed a single platform for, in effect, CX. So everything that I'm talking about, whether it's contact center, digital channels, telephony, call recording, AI transcription, AI virtual agents, it's all part of the Zoom the Zoom platform. So in terms of doing more with less, we can consolidate your suppliers. So many organizations I speak to will have a separate telephony platform, probably separate call recording. They may then, their existing provider may have third parties for various AI functionality. We can bring all of that and consolidate into one system. Even, Dave, we've recently had one of our housing customers in Wales. They've saved money by cancelling their room booking and desk booking system, because that's something else that you can do on the Zoom platform. And they're now integrating that into their door management system, creating virtual receptionists. So I think when we understand and we're invited in to really understand your organisation, we really can do that cost consolidation piece. I think then the next step really is looking at, right, we've got a baseline of a system in place. What can we do then to start automating certain elements of whether it's customer service or internal processes? So, for example, we mentioned call summaries. That's a big productivity gain. So, agents, we've just been on a call now with a housing association that take 5 minutes to do a call wrap up. Well, we've shown we could do that in 30 seconds with AI summarization. The virtual agents, can they do an element of the ID and verification piece in the first instance? And then can they actually go, well, do you know what, if someone's calling around their repair, can it book an alternative appointment or do something around that? And then the big one that I'm really interested in right now, that our customers are interested in, is out of hours support. So you're probably commissioning a third party contact center provider to do that. There's definitely the capability and the capacity to look at automation and AI to take some of that out of hours and extend your office hours without kind of extending the amount of money that you're spending. So lots of stuff to talk about in this space, Dave. But it's all around, we want to come in with Cloud Clever and really understand some of those processes and how we can help save money and do more with less.
What do you think would be some practical steps that organisations could do in advance to prepare for these changes?
I think the absolute key one, if there's one, if you said to me there was one that was the most important, it's engage with your staff early. So some of the successful projects we've done, and one recently up north of the border in Scotland, what they did really effectively was they got all stakeholders involved and surveyed them and learned around, right, what are you doing today? What is it that tenants like? What is it that they don't like? What's preventing staff from delivering great tenant experiences? And really doing that kind of persona-based stakeholder mapping of, like, what is it? How does this link into your organisational strategy? Where things sometimes can fall down is where it's just an IT push, because these kind of changes are very much operational. These are if you think of I always describe the contact centre as it's the digital front door to your tenants, to your tenant experience. So it has to come from an organisational level. How are you performing against your tenant satisfaction measures? What are your tenants saying that they don't like? Are they waiting on the phone for too long? Can they not access the information they want? We really need, I think that's the key thing, understand where you are, where you want to go. And then speak to us, because then we can help bring in our experts, so the technology experts. But probably equally, if not more important, is this kind of, I always call it a community of housing associations, and that's at Zoom what we're really creating. We want our customers to speak to each other as well, because you're all in the same boat. You've all got the same or similar challenges, and you can learn and collaborate off each other. So that's the big one, Dave, really, is really reflect and know what your challenges are.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think with my old engineering hat on, I've been doing this a long time, and I don't want to upset too many IT managers that are sat listening to the podcast, but IT can generally gatekeep new solutions. They don't want it to be too complicated. They want to keep a degree of control. And certainly for me, where we're looking for genuine transformative solutions, it absolutely need to be run from the customer facing teams. And I double down, actually. I was going to look and give a bit more advice or a different point, but I double down there. It's a really good point, and it's engaging across organization, and even talking to the citizens and seeing what we can do to help. And we'd be delighted, wouldn't we, to help in these areas?
Absolutely. And I think just to pick up on a really important point around IT, our projects that we've run have been successful, but we're actually creating heroes out of the IT team, because the IT team are, I think you mentioned earlier, able to give the operational teams more control, appropriate levels of control, and everything at Zoom is access based, and you can really control that. You know, ultimately, the customer service teams know the tenants the best, so giving them the ability to self-serve to an extent, but then also when the business needs something from IT, to be really responsive and agile. It's not the old days of like the on-premise days where things are difficult to configure. To be really responsive and agile, and IT then really, it helps show the value. You know, you're having a direct impact on an IT deployment to improving tenant experience. And that's what I love about housing. You know, everyone I speak to, all of the people that I speak to in the housing sector, they've got one thing in common, and they're all in it to make things better for the most vulnerable people. And that's something we can absolutely help with.
I absolutely agree. One final point, and I think I'll kind of reflect on it because it's something we haven't spoken about in too much detail, but a migration to Zoom doesn't have to be big bang. And some of the most successful migrations I've done over the last year or two from legacy systems, IP systems, on-prem solutions, is that, you know, with our skills, not wanting to delve too technically into it, but we have the ability to link Zoom into legacy solutions such as a Mitel or an Avaya, and it means we can look at maybe the 24/7 elements that are high cost, difficult to resource, and important to the citizens. We can look to go next gen with technology in a kind of priority basis where the back office can stay on a legacy solution, where we can move the important elements into the technology with AI, with where we're looking at transcription, all of the clever things we can do, but we don't have to do it immediately, and we can keep the lights on the legacy kit. So I think for me, it's just making our listeners aware that, you know, absolutely that move from legacy into next gen doesn't have to be big bang. And for you, Chris, for any housing associations that are feeling stuck with their legacy systems, would there be any advice you'd give?
I think what you've just said is absolutely correct. So from a Zoom perspective, we've got vendor alliances with the likes of Mitel and Avaya, and then you've got the capability on top of that, and the skill set in your professional services team to make a solution all work together. I think don't wait, really. You know, I've spoken to organisations where it's like it's a project, but it's like it falls down the priority stack. And kind of what I say back to that is, well, what's more of a priority than how you are interacting with your tenants, and that kind of front door to your tenants. What is more of a priority than that? So there's never going to be the perfect time for change, realistically. But I think, as you've said, Dave, it's speak to us, let us help understand your organisation, how things are structured. It's very rarely that we see anything that we've not seen before. And we can start small and we can build from there. There might be a single use case we use. It might start with a contact centre. It might start with virtual agents. It might start from the phone system or elsewhere, you know, because otherwise the danger is that you get into a cycle of, I've got to I'll renew for another year what we've already got. And a year is not a long time in this space. And then you then fast forward to next year and you're in the same position. We've got various technical options and commercial options to help you go faster and to transform quicker. So I think it's just reach out to us and let us know how we can help, really.
I absolutely agree. I think we're about where we need to be in terms of time. So, Chris, thanks as always for sitting down and sharing your invaluable knowledge. And certainly, if anyone is interested or wants to follow up on what the best next steps are, it would be to absolutely get in touch. We'd be delighted to look at customers' organisations, challenges that they're facing, and absolutely working in tandem with you and the team at Zoom, we can cover off what are the next best steps.